So welcome to the Afterlife Book Club, Michele. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Gary. It is such a delight to see all your faces and to be here tonight. I wrote this book and published it in 2016. So it's been out for a while, Forevermore, a love story from the edge of eternity. And it's lovely to be able to talk with people who find these ideas inspirational and filled with hope. So thank you all for coming. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have been a writer since I was old enough, I guess, to pick up a pencil. My inclination was always to write down little stories. I wrote my first newspaper when I was 12 years old, and I had joined a drum and bugle corps, which was a fun activity for me and my friends. And I wrote that was when I wrote my first newspaper. And from there, I high school newspaper, and in college, I was a writer for the college magazine. And I just kept following that thread, but I never planned to do it professionally until by accident, I got a job as a copy kid at the Buffalo Courier-Express, which Mark Twain worked on when he was a young man in Buffalo. So I was a copy kid, and it occurred to me because I had my foot in the door that perhaps this was something I could do as a career. And I immediately changed my major from phys ed to journalism and proceeded to follow a career that is something that I feel like I was born to do. It's funny that it took me so long to figure that out. And from there, my path to this particular topic of life after death and human potential began as a young journalist when I got one of my first assignments was to cover a woman. She's a psychic, and she was teaching blind people how to feel the energy of colors with their hands. And I was so delighted to have this be a story that I could write about. And I went back to the newsroom where it was like a football field, and it was filled with smoke. It was the most interesting place to be, but filled with a lot of skeptics who didn't quite take to my story. I remember talking out loud at the city desk to my editor and saying, "Oh my God, this story is so great." And this columnist who I so admired came walking by, and she said, "That woman ought to be in jail." And as a cub reporter, I was like, "Uh-oh, I must have believed." And apparently that's something that journalists aren't supposed to do, is to believe these kinds of crazy stories. So I went on to write a story that was a little tethered by the opinion of my veteran columnist friend. And it wasn't my best work because I was just stunned, first of all, that people wouldn't think this was miraculous. In any event, the newspaper, I worked there for a total of about 10 years, and the newspaper ended up closing. And I sought this psychic out. And because now I had all this free time, I had to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And I was going to write a magazine story about her and her work. And she invited me into her classes. It was a series of classes she was giving to a whole group of everyday people, a race car driver, a businesswoman, a married couple. And she proceeded through the course of, I think there was a week-long course and then another week-long course, which I was going to just observe and write about. And in fact, she kind of insisted and reeled me in to engage, and we were all practicing psychic behaviors that she insisted we all could do. At one point, I held a set of keys in my hand and was able to describe the man who owned the keys. And in another case, I flipped over a picture. We exchanged pictures, and I could describe who the woman in the picture was. And oddly enough, I've never used these skills. I don't use them a lot, but that experience taught me, that we all can do far more than I think we can as the human race. And secondly, it empowered me as a human myself. It wasn't like I was going around holding people's keys, but I understood that I knew more than I thought I did, and that I should trust my instincts more. And that kind of set me off on my journey to learn more about the meaning of life. But I was also at the same time, I was a young mother and I was very close to my own mother. And I realized, because it wasn't ever going to happen to me, but I realized someday she might die because that's what people do. And I knew that, but it was impossible to wrap my head around it. Her death, my death, anybody's death. And so I proceeded to go off, as I said, on a search for the meaning of life, but to explore this thing called dying. And so I started, of course, with a pile of books, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which, it was like a box of chocolates, and I kept pulling them out, trying to see if I could find the answers, and proceeded then through the course of my life to, as I'm sure all of you have, just book after book, because first of all, I couldn't believe there were so many books like this. And second of all, they made me feel good. I couldn't get over how the idea of death could be described as something more beautiful than people have words for. And at the same time, I had gone back to journalism. Again, we're talking the course of, 40 years. So there are a couple things you need to know about that, is that being a journalist, the kind of journalist I was that I was always drawn to and was given the stories of these wonderful, courageous humans, inspirational stories, great stories about people doing wonderful things. So my worldview is really optimistic. It annoys people sometimes, but I always say, newspapers are supposed to tell you the bad news, but you really don't understand it. I feel like I had the only job in the world where every day I would meet someone doing wonderful things, giving of themselves or creating something new and marvelous. So that kind of helped me to understand that things are never quite as they appear, and they're certainly never as dark as they appear. And I was determined to find a project that I could use my skills as a journalist to somehow influence the world and get that message across. But that's a really long story. And there's even more about dealing with all this this new uncertainty about the ethics of the media, because I am a print journalist, and I have worked with so many people, so many journalists who take their work very seriously. And so that all kind of created who I am. And in the course of all these books I was reading about death and dying, I like to say if someone ever found my cell phone or looked at my Kindle, they would think I was the daughter of darkness, because all of my books are like, what really happens when we die, or 10 Minutes in Heaven, all of those books. I'm sure that the same could be true of all of you, is that I have lots of books about where we go when we die. And the thing that puzzled me the most as a journalist was, okay, so I have a Kindle loaded with these stories, and of course the paper books as well. And people don't talk about death. They're terrified of it. They don't think it's ever going to happen to them, like I felt when I was a young 30-year-old. And I thought, if I could just find a story to tell, much like Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, of course, and the gentleman who wrote The Celestine Prophecy. These are books that really changed people, and you may have not necessarily understood, maybe the writing wasn't like The Celestine Prophecy I love, because he used the storytelling to open people's minds to ideas that we are more, and that we do have more potential than we think we do. And so as a result, that's what happened. I came across this idea. I love listening to channelers, because I'm mystified by how that happens and where that wisdom comes from. And I really wanted to write a story about somebody channeling somebody. And I remember, you probably all do, Jay-Z Knight, I think, used to walk about as the presence that she was channeling. I know.
Ramtha.
Yes. And Esther Hicks, can hold the presence inside of her for an entire day's worth of no, she doesn't lecture for an entire day, but, seminar, long, hours of seminars. And then there was Jane Roberts, whose Seth used to smoke a cigarette and drink a beer, and as I recall from her books. I mean, it's fascinating. And I wanted to incorporate something like that in a story. And that is pretty much, and then deciding, the last thing I'm going to say, because I feel like I am taking up way too much time here, is that Lilydale is a place not far from my home in Buffalo. It's about an hour and 15 minutes drive. And it is magical. It's a little cottage community on a little lake in, excuse me, New York. And it's a place where people go so they can somehow contact their dead, the people in their lives who have died. And as you all may know, Deborah especially, that these are all mediums who have literally taken a test to certify themselves as mediums. And there's always just wonderful, interesting things. And I knew I wanted to set the book there, and I did. And that pretty much describes, and as I explained, the story was coming as I was writing it. And then I published it, self-published it. And then it has this really temperate response, every now and then. It's definitely not in my desire would be for it to go further out into the world, because I do think that it's a fun story. It's outrageous, and it presents some ideas that people might want to think about if they don't know about them. And I think they're presented in a friendly, almost humorous kind of a way, so they're not frightening. And ultimately, my goal would be for people to understand what I have learned, and what I really hope is true, because I don't have actual experience of it, is that, as I said, that death is the most beautiful thing that we can experience, and that there are no words to describe what the extraordinary experiences that occur according to those who have come back. So, long story. I feel kind of breathless from saying all those words, but I hope I got my ideas across.
That was great. And they always tell me there is no death. There is no afterlife. There's only life.
There's only life. Are you a channeler, Gary?
No. Well, who knows?
Who knows? Honestly, I believe I think we all channel bits and pieces. That's the wisdom that pops in your head, and you go, geez, that was a good idea.
Yeah, it did come from me. Yeah, I know the feeling. Well, let's get started with some questions. Peter, you wrote me the most beautiful email about this book. So I'm going to start with you, because that was just fantastic. You made my day this morning when I found that. So your impressions of the book, and any question you might have for Michele.
Well, first of all, it was a book that I felt was real all throughout what I read. I can also identify with Charlie when you first started your book with Rebecca, and how intuitive they are to see the afterlife. And I had a similar circumstance with a Down syndrome boy, and I remember this one time in particular. I was working with them, and Downs are very obstinate, and they're just very obstinate. So I remember all through the whole school year, I was a special needs aide for a Down's child, Justin. And I would always tell him, Justin, feel. Well, at the end of the school year almost, what did Justin do? And he didn't speak a word, but he came to me with his hands up like this and said, Sheldon, I can feel. And so I really identified with Charlie, and I learned a lot about myself just by reading the book. It just seemed, everything seemed very real. It's just unbelievable. It was a very good book, and I read the whole thing.
Wow, thank you. I love that you say that it's real, because it's all based on real accounts. And I feel like that's kind of the way I write as a journalist. I take someone's story and I tell it as best I can. And while there's no actual true accounts that I didn't filter through my storytelling lens, I know that there certainly are books that I read before I wrote this story about children on the spectrum, and how there are accounts of children who are deeply connected to the spiritual world. And so I love that you have evidence of that, and that you think it's a real story. That's high praise. Thank you.
Excellent read.
Thank you.
Peter, did you have a question or?
I kind of molded my statements with questions and
Got your answer.
Yes, very good.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Peter. Grace.
Well, I would like to have Sebastian telephone number, but maybe it's not possible. Part of that, I think we all want, or
Yes, me
almost
too.
all want. Yeah, we agree. Now I have two questions, more serious. First of all, when the second the book comes, because I think I am waiting for knowing what happens now that Rebecca is there and not here. That's one
I've
thing.
thought about that. I thought about taking on Lilibeth's story. In fact, I started writing it because she's so gifted, and because for her death is not, because I imagine her as a death doula to be exactly the right person then to kind of warm people up to the topic. Because for some reason, I've always loved to think that death, and I'm sure you've all heard this expression, is just the opposite. It's exactly the same thing. It's birth. It's coming in with, noise sometimes and chaos, but mostly it should be celebrated in the same manner as a birth, because of the birth that into the next part of our lives is kind of the way.
Wait for the next book club.
I love that you. Thank you. Thank you.
The other question is, supposing it's not 100% fiction, the Albert Sebastian situation, what was the inspiration? What real fact was similar, if not the same, of course, than that? Because I never heard about that thing, that you can go out from your body, take a cup of tea, and at the same time someone is using your body for something else. Where that comes from?
Well, I have heard those stories, and I have heard they occur even in manners of people who are grieving their spouse and making love to a substitute for the spouse. The actual leaving of the way Albert leaves his body and goes up into what we might call heaven or the afterlife, or just the next step, as Gary said, because we don't die, is, I guess, of all the things that would be considered part of my imagination, I just kind of took off on where Jane Roberts said she went and where Esther Hicks said she goes. They kind of move aside, and they're in this spacey kind of place. So I did push that just a little further, because I figured that even because that was possible if you believe all of this other stuff to be true. And so
but in your book, that happens at the same time. Not only someone leaves the body, but at the same time someone else is using that body.
Right, and the way I imagine it is that's what occurs when people channel, that someone's using their body, and they have to step aside. And my impression of that and what occurs is that is a dreamy space where you could conceivably go to the afterlife. And am I answering your question appropriately? Because
because what I found, you are a very good writer. It's extraordinary. Because I find when the eyes can change, you know who's there, because the eyes changing. This is incredible. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that. I did want to add that I also, like my next goal, I recently retired from my full-time job as a journalist, and now I get to play a little bit, and I'm hoping to go to the Monroe Institute, where I personally can have experience of stepping out and going to these places. And that's kind of what that's all about for me. But thank you for your kind words.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was great. Yeah, channeling, that's what they say. Some say they just go to somewhere else. And and the spirit person comes through. So yeah, good question, Grace. Deborah.
Yes.
I'll try not to take too long because I know we all just would like to absorb everything with you. Like I could have a full day with you. I have a few things. First of all, I was like Peter. I thought it was so real that I really thought this was you going through these experiences. That at the end of the book, when she dies, I'm like, well, that can't be her because she's coming on as a speaker, as the author. And I actually cried. I was crying. It really touched me. As a medium, I started out doing that in circles and practicing with friends and kind of doing those kind of things of letting spirit talk to me, knowing that reading it and seeing how fun it was for these individuals to, dabble with spirit makes me want to do this. That's how much the book was inspired me. Like, oh, I want to get a group and let spirit speak to me, use my body. Now, the third thing is I've done readings before where I connect with two people and they have switched. This person wanted to commit suicide. The other person wanted to come in, and they call them step-ins. So it really has happened, and they carry almost the same name. And I was so confused. I'm like, who am I talking to? And then she explained, I'm so glad I'm talking to you because you're getting what I need to get. And I'm like, well, could you explain what I'm getting? And it was that they switched. So for the rest of their life, not just a little bit. And then the other part is the Monroe Institute. I actually worked with Anne and her superior who worked with the Monroe Institute with Edgar Casey. And that's where I got my certification as a healer, is through them.
Wow.
So everything seems very connected when I read your book. And I just feel it's a privilege to know you. And I think you tapped into something that is going to open the minds of the healers and the mediums to take it to the next level.
That would be beyond my wildest dreams, because I do feel like it needs to be. I mean, I feel the same way about all of you being here because I know that's your area of interest and that you all believe in this stuff. And I don't believe the world can change unless we all spread this information out even more intently than we have, because this is what the world needs to heal. And secondly, because I told you my work as a journalist was always writing about these wonderful people every day, my faith in mankind is so much stronger than a lot of people I run into on the streets and in my family, because they don't have the evidence that I do, that there are so many just waiting for some sort of, I want to say, group energy. And so the fact that you even said that this makes you want to do more in your work, I find not only am I honored by that, I'm delighted by that. It's thrilling to me.
Yeah, and so my question was like the same as Grace's. I felt like, what part of this was you? Because you wrote so well that I felt that this was you speaking, that you were her. And so I was like, okay, but you answered that to Grace. So that was my question, is like, where were you in this book? Because
I am Rebecca, for the most part. Like, I feel like I inhabited her body, but I also, as you can all imagine, I feel like imaginatively we can all do that, and it makes us stronger and wiser as humans. So I took her as far as I could go, and I did. She and I kind of shared, because she's very much like me. I've never had her experiences, but it's funny because as a journalist, I'm very firmly grounded. And so it's the work of this part of my life to connect with what's been left aside, as I worked every day to make sure I got the facts right and to understand the story. And it's a lot of pressure to tell someone's story and do it right, because especially in the newspaper, people don't get into the newspaper often. And when they do, if I've screwed up the details, that's so heartbreaking for both me and the person I'm writing about. So in any event, now now I can't remember, forgive me. So I got lost in that circle.
I would say that you have a gift and you should start using it, because in order to write this this is a gift and you understand the gift of the abilities. So I feel that you have it within you. You should tap into that.
Thank you, Deborah. And I'm not being modest. What I believe with my whole heart is that we all do in varying degrees. And because mine have been so suppressed, I guess that's what I was saying, that at this part of my life, I'm hoping to not only to experience far more, but to be able to talk about it in ways that influence these people who are feeling a little lost right now and worried about whether or not we're all going to be here tomorrow, you know.
Thank you.
Did that sound too grim?
No, no, that's great.
Deborah,
and I
thank
think
you.
I feel another book coming on for you now that you've retired from journalism.
Well,
I think, and you know,
thank
your
you.
book sales went up this month because we all bought a copy. Well, you sent me one, but and I thank you for that. So
look at that. Thank you, Peter. And thank you for saying, Gary. And my sales have been so minimal. And I just keep, I'm like the little ant with the rubber tree plant, you know, I just keep nudging it, hoping that, in fact, I'm working on a film that I might personally shoot myself in Lilydale with my iPhone. Because as a journalist, I do all my videography on an iPhone. And so I have, because I keep sending it out, and you know, nobody's paying much attention to me. And I feel like that, what do they say about being on a dark stage, you know?
I need to hook you up with Stephen Simon.
Well, I did, Stephen, because I met him once in Buffalo when I was working as the editor of Holistic magazine. So I reached out to him, but he's very, very concentrated, and rightfully so, on getting his own message out. He said he hasn't looked at a script in, I think, 20 years or so. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to push him. And I just figured because...
But he may give you some leads. Even if he can't do it, he may point you in some good directions. So,
you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send him a copy of my book and say,
there you go. There you go. Let's keep moving along. Del, any thoughts on the book? Any questions?
Thank you, Gary. Michelle, I have to tell you that I'm new to the group, and I just lost the love of my life in August. So,
I'm so sorry.
Experiencing the studies of the afterlife are new to me. And prior to August, you know, I probably wouldn't have picked up your book because I'm a big fan of Michael Conley and Joseph Wambaugh, and they were more related to my prior employment. But I couldn't put your book down when I started it. And I have to agree with Deborah and some of the others that it was just phenomenal. And because the death of my wife is so fresh, I mean, some of the things that you wrote about and the experiences of Rebecca, when you're reading it, from my perspective is, boy, I hope this is true because it's pretty exciting. And the fact that, and the other part is, what really struck me was the exchanges between Rebecca and her husband. Was it Michael?
Michael, yeah.
Was heartbreaking, the way you described it. And his suggestion that he wanted to bring another female into the relationship. You could just feel the emotion there through your writing. It was exceptional.
Thank you.
What I would like to ask is, there was an earlier question, and I can't remember the person's name, forgive me, but about the exchange of one person being used in another person's body, and then there was a sexual relationship between what was Albert's body and Sebastian and Rebecca. And you mentioned previously a couple of channeling individuals. Your experience with them and some of their experiences, could you describe that in a little more detail about what you knew from your exchanges with those? I think her name was Roberts and Hicks.
Jane Roberts.
Yeah, and the channeling experiences, because that's all brand new to me. So I'm really interested in.
I'm guessing there are several people here that could describe it probably better than me, but I'm going to do the best I can because I literally have immersed, kind of immersed myself in these stories for so long, these true accounts from these channelers. Because I find it so fascinating. Because when I'm frustrated or fearful, I turn on some Esther Hicks channelings because she makes me laugh. And sometimes her answers are profound. And I don't know if she's actually channeling a group of spirits, but she could be, because it's extraordinary to hear the wisdom just come pouring out of her without thought. And if any of you have ever tried to talk at length to a crowd of people who are seeking your advice, to see that these words come out. So, and the process, the way I understand it, is you go into a meditation or a relaxation, and as it's been described, and then the information drops in blocks of words. And so the channeler uses their words to interpret the blocks that are dropping into their consciousness. And that's how the wisdom is offered very often from what is described as a group of spiritual entities, and which aligns perfectly with people who've had near-death experiences, millions and millions of people who've had them, and describe them very often as sitting among a group of spiritual guides. So it kind of connects that way for me. Again, and I think it keeps going back to my being a journalist and spending my whole life, getting my whole adult life, getting the accounts of people's stories for the newspaper, and then hearing so many of these accounts from people who write practically the same thing about channeling or their near-death experiences. It cannot not be true. I haven't actually had one myself, but it cannot not be true. And so when for instance, that you said, I think, Grace, that you said it felt real, and Peter said it too. What that is actually is it's almost my channeling of all of this information, all these real accounts, and in crafting them into a story that maybe will be more palatable to some readers someday who aren't, as we are, so accustomed to these topics. And it's interesting that you say that, because that these are new to you, because I'm always interested to hear what a person who hasn't been researching and studying these ideas their whole life, whether or not they find them terrifying or completely so hard to believe. And I think that your attitude, especially now with the loss of your wife, right? You said your wife, not your wife.
I found hope through your writing, that at least at some point, maybe I will be able to experience a hug or an embrace and know it's her. So it was beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you. And I feel like that there's a very good chance of that happening, and you'll know when it does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Del. Now I'd like to call on Sherry Pearl, who actually used to sit with Jane Roberts and Seth.
No.
And, yes, Sherry's got a colorful background. So, Sherry, go ahead.
Hi. And I will tell you, Delwyn, that I did with my own eyes experience seeing Seth enter Jane, take over her body. And in her case, she would have absolutely no idea what he said. She'd go into trance. He would take her glasses off and throw them down. And he would speak to us. He was very funny also and very eloquent, but this was a very small woman. And when Seth would come through, her neck would bulge, and the mannerisms and the voice and even the accent was not Jane. There's no question in my mind that another personality spoke through Jane. When she would come out of trance, she'd say, "What did he say?" Because she was completely not aware. And we would start to say, well, he said this, and if someone got it wrong, he'd come right through and say, "You are incorrect. That is not what I said." So there was quite an interaction, but there's no question in my mind at this point that spirit can do that. But just listen to the thoughts that go through your own mind in your own voice when you call out to her, and just ask her, "How are you, sweetheart?" And just send that out, and just listen to what goes through your own mind. You'll hear, "I love you, honey," or "I'm there." You'll think it's just your imagination because it comes through that same window. I'll be speaking at the Global Gathering on Sunday, this Sunday at 3. And if you can join that, I'll be talking a lot about how that comes through to us. And because of my own book, Lost and Found, based on losing my son in the flesh and finding him in the spirit. But indeed, I'm glad that you have read Michelle's book, because she's very right on. And I didn't find anything in all my years, over 50 years of studying this field, I didn't find her off the wall or in any way not, having her own accurateness. What I wanted to say to Michelle is that, although I'm sure Gary told me you were a journalist and it was fiction, I just must have blotted that out, because I'm reading it and I'm reading it, and all of a sudden things start hitting chords with it that I thought, "Oh my God, is this for real?" I mean, like, that someone, because it really rang true for me with the healer that helped me so much when I was dying as a young girl, and now is my guide in spirit. And there is a connection so profound that so rights me, that just so sets me on my feet, that when I read that, I was just blown away by what I believe to be true, which is we have these relationships that go on unbeknownst to us because we dumb down so much to get into the flesh, and it maybe is hard. So I think what you've done is great, and I do hope that it gets out there, because it is a fun way to be introduced to these ideas, because they can be, a lot to take on. So it was wonderfully done. Thank you so very much, Michelle.
Thank you. You guys are like balm to my soul. It's hearing these words that you found it real and that you found it true.
It did.
I cannot tell you, after the years that I've had it out there, thinking this must have just been, maybe it was the 30 readers that needed to see it. And
you know what?
Honestly,
These are hard. I mean, my books have been on the market, Healing from the Inside Out, which is I put it out again in 2011 because I had to update it, because although my healing story stayed the same, my philosophy changed over the years, Mm-hmm. So but it is so hard to move self-published books from my perspective, unless you're just going to keep going out there and pushing and pushing and pushing. I have a number of books out there, and I also think that those who've read them have gotten some help from them. But it's hard it's not the easiest thing. But then Seth would say, that's a belief. So, I don't want to sit and say that, but my experience has been, I think they're very valuable, but if I were trying to make a living off of my books.
Well, I guess that's the point for all of us, is that, we have to let go of the outcome. We have to do the work, let go of the outcome. So that's really what I'm trying to do. It is really understanding that, as in all of life, if you want to have peace, you just go do the next thing.
That's right. I'm so with you. So nice to meet you.
And the fact is that I keep going back to, my God, the world is so crazy right now. That's why I love the Afterlife Report, because it gives me hope in every story. And I find that so comforting.
Well, I will tell you that right now, people that I'm very close to are going through some very hard times. And it's been a real test of my faith. And if it was not for my knowledge of a bigger picture, I don't know how any of us could take daily life on the earth today.
Oh my gosh.
I never thought things would ever be this crazy. And I rely on that, knowledge. And sometimes, the doubting mind doubts. And I'm like, well, am I just crazy? But I'd rather be crazy and believe what I believe. If sanity means accepting war is the way we solve our problems and destroying our planet is the way to live, then I think I'll take insanity any day.
Well, here's the obnoxious part of my personality is that because I know how all the good people out there, because that was my endless work every day, was writing these wonderful stories that people would say, oh, they're so beautiful. And then they'd go read about the bad news, which is fine. The balance is great. And I am certain, I love to look at the thousands of people who, every time I go to a spiritual video on YouTube of the leaders of the movements it doesn't matter. There are so many people working for good, and you'll see that they have thousands and thousands of views. So always remember, I think, and that's what I keep telling myself and my children, to the point where they go like, yeah, we know there's good people in the world, but Mom, what about, and I feel like those good people, and the vast majority of them are silent, because they're all kind of watching and waiting. And again, so that's why I get my hope from this kind of stories that I shared in my book, and the kinds of stories that we all enjoy in the Afterlife Report.
And
So-
I'll add a note that Seth said, because since I know you were like Seth, he said to us, you worry so much about your world, and I understand that, he said, but please understand that, you've had the ability to destroy the earth 1,000 times over for a long time, but you haven't, because all of you who love life and love the earth help to withhold your world. And so I think it's what you're talking about, the balance.
Nice.
And since our basic news doesn't report that most of the time, we get like fixated and forgetting,
Exactly.
but we're still standing, right?
And look around, look at all the wonderful people we each know. I just keep thinking there's this minuscule amount of people, and I don't want to be naive. I know there's people out there who are devoted to the kind of ideas that aren't healthy in our world. And yet I am also deeply aware, because of the work I did every day for so long, about the good.
And the background message of all of this, it's all about love.
Yes.
And if you're coming from love, everything else falls into place, doesn't it?
I love that, and it sounds like way too simplistic, and yet it is the answer to all things.
It is.
And that's the kind of thing I was hoping to sneak in. I really was just trying to say I wanted people to be drawn into the story, then come to the awareness that it is only about love.
That's it. Jane, how about you?
Thank you, Sherry.
Well, everyone has said everything that I wanted to say, but I can say that you had me at Charlie.
Yeah.
Really?
Had me at Charlie, and how beautiful the symmetry of ending with Lily Beth. Three of my siblings have children on the spectrum, and I have a very huge place in my heart for them. And I also have gone to Lilydale. I'm reading at the Stump.
At the Stump. It's a beautiful stump in the woods where people gather, in these ancient woods.
Yep.
That's awesome.
My great aunt came to me. She passed away to the other side at 102. So it was nice to hear from her. And I'm like, the touchstones were there, and it was refreshing for me, because you also had a maturity. I felt that the woman writing this book knew mature love, had lived, and you just spoke like you lived it. The heartache and the possibility, and the resilience. And I wanted in on all of it. And I love the way you use the butterfly analogy. You snuck it in there throughout. I thought you were so smart, rich, human. How's your driving, by the way? You got
I'm a terrible driver. No, no, I'm kidding.
driving in there. But I just, like everyone said, I felt as if you actually experienced everything in the book that you wrote. You embodied, or I thought you did, the book, the experiences in the book. And I want to thank you. And I want to read your next one. And I'm just, I'm sick of reading. I'm not sick, but I mean, there was a maturity about it. And since I'm in that mature phase of life, I was like, great, I love this woman, write some more. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. I am overwhelmed. You are the most gracious and kind and thoughtful group of readers I've ever had the pleasure to be in front of, and I feel that if no one else ever reads it, the fact that you guys have enjoyed it is just, it's thrilling. Thank you.
And here I was reticent, and you probably remember this from our first communication, Michele, about presenting a fiction book, because I go so much into the old mediums and what they did and physical mediumship, where actual, materializations occurred. And so this was, I was nervous about going to a novel on the subject, but not now.
I was kind of nervous too, honestly.
And I have to say, page 3, I was like, oh, this woman knows how to write. Yeah, this is going to be a good book. And that was when I decided to write you and go, yeah, let's do this. So
I was surprised when you said yes. I was thinking about that today. I get a lot of no's. I get a lot of agents who don't write back, or people just go, sorry, not interested. And so when you wrote back, I was, you didn't just make my day. I think you made my year.
Oh, good.
Again, because I always thought that if I could get this in the hands of people who thought as I do and who understood the things that I've spent my life trying to learn, and who are certain that we live on in not in a necessarily religious way, but in a kind of global, energetic, spiritual way that we of course live on. With all this evidence, how could we not?
Yeah.
And
it wouldn't make much sense if we didn't, would it?
No, it wouldn't make any sense at all if we didn't. Not at all. But I have to ask Jane, why'd you ask about the driving? Because I do joke that I'm a little like Mr. Magoo. Things crash behind me and in front of me, but they kind of around me.
You're driving around a lot.
Oh, because I move like
going here, going there, with urgency.
Oh, yes. I see what you mean. Yes, that's actually how I drive. But thank you for asking about my driving. I'm not that bad of a driver. I still get to keep my license. There's no one yet going, should she really still be driving? So that's a positive.
Thank you.
It is.
Thank
Patricia, did you read the book?
Yes, I did. And I totally enjoyed it. I had problems putting it down. I went from chapter, I went one more chapter. Everything around me just stopped. I just was so involved in all the characters. I absolutely loved it.
I just am so happy to be here right now.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Patricia, anything else that you wanted to ask Michele, or that was it? Are you frozen?
No, I just want to know, I totally enjoyed the book, and it was very well done. That's all. Thank you for writing that book.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
I have to tell you, Patty is new to all of this. So when I was at her house this afternoon, she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so new with all of this. Is this real? And so she couldn't wait to be on here tonight. So I'm just letting you know, she's new at this too.
That is so interesting to know, and I hope none of it scared you. And I love that you have said you felt it was real, because to me, it is real. To me, every bit of it is real. It's just I took other people's stories and merged them together into a single story. But except for the part about where exactly Albert went when he had loaned his body to Sebastian, because you'd have to be Albert to know exactly that. Every bit of it has come from true accounts, and so I'm really glad. And I want you to, and I guess for someone who's new to this, if you walk away from here knowing that we have so much more potential to do good on the planet for not only ourselves, but all of the other humans who are here with us. I mean,
and animals.
Yeah. And the
animals.
And the plants. And yes, all of that. Yes. I'm doing a documentary because I'm a journalist and I do a lot of videos for the stories with my phone. Now I'm doing a documentary by almost accident about a donkey rescue farm. And it turns out donkeys are very cool if you ever get the opportunity to meet one. And by way of that, I'm saying it's the older I get, the more I'm aware that like there's so much alive and full of love and connecting us. And it's a delight to be able to put words out there that help people get that.
Great. Susan.
Thank you, Patricia.
You're muted. You're muted.
There you are. Hi, Susan.
You're still muted.
About now.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully y'all hear me because as always, my internet is unstable. I'm sorry, Michelle, I live in Southern Georgia. We don't have internet here, I don't think. But yes, your book was brilliant. I have to say that when I first saw what Gary's choice was, I was hesitant. Okay, because I thought, fiction. Okay, that's an interesting choice. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I can grow, I can expand a little, stretch a little bit. And then I looked at it a little more and I'm like, a love story. Not only is it fiction, but it's a love story.
A love story, I know.
And, when you think about love stories, you think about those cupboards with the women like falling out of their dress and
Well, I had some fun with that too. So yeah, I know what you mean. I understand.
So
I too would have gone like, really? Although I have looked for a book like this. I mean, I read a lot of fiction. I mostly read true accounts because those are what give me the real hope about, I read true accounts of everything to understand people more, to get a better sense of the world. But every now and then a good fiction story knocks me off my feet too. And I love that feeling.
Yeah.
But I also wondered, would it matter if these were all based on true accounts? If to the reader, especially someone new like Patricia or Adele, would it matter if they were based on true stories, if that would make it more, I don't know, potent or hopeful? And so anyway, so you read it and
I read
how
it.
long did it take for you to go like, okay?
It wasn't long. I mean, I got sucked in really early. And it was really, it was very surprising to me, but I felt very uplifted by your book.
Oh,
I think somebody else said that too, that it just makes you feel good. And it makes you feel like, oh yes, this is all the stuff that we talk about. This is all the stuff that we believe. This is all the stuff that is here like in a human story. And it was wonderful. I loved it. I have to tell you that my favorite quote, and I'll give you a little background on why it's my favorite quote, but you know how we've all been talking about how it's been like really terrible lately, like in the last couple of years, COVID, one thing after another, terrible news everywhere you look. And a lot of people are having their own personal traumas on top of that, their own personal misfortunes. I've had, some of I've had a crazy 2 years, and on top of everything that's going on. And
I remember thinking to myself, you know, this earthly existence is really a lot more than I bargained for. And would it be so bad, like if something just happened to me and I got to go to my heavenly reward and I and I could enjoy the fruits of the afterlife and seeing all my people and my guides and all of that. And my favorite quote was, I believe it was Sebastian who said, Rebecca, you do not want to hurry your life to its finish. It's like leaving before you've opened up all your presents. And I felt like, yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. So
nicely said, Susan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I loved it. Thank you for writing it.
I wish I could take the credit. You know, we all know that you know, when we're doing the work we're put here to do, it just kind of comes. And honestly, it hasn't come again. So I'm kind of waiting. I like to, you know, as I said, I've recently left my full-time job as a journalist, and I'm kind of waiting for my marching orders. And I'm determined at this very short period of, you know, like this time, to really just kind of learn to listen and to tune in and so these lovely words you're all saying about my writing, believe me, I can't hear that enough, because everyone has insecurities about their work, especially the quiet reception that this book has received. In any event, so that's I can't take the credit, but I'm very, very happy that my efforts have touched you guys. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's really great to hear that you've heard that you feel me, you know, that you get me, and that this story touched you in the way that it's touched me. And today I was thinking, like, what if I never write another book? And this would have to be like what I leave. This is the story I leave behind. And geez, I hope I write another book, because I you know, it would, especially now that I have some time on my hands. But if I don't, this would be my gift to the world, or my words to the world. I'm not sure everybody would see it as a gift, but again, I appreciate that you guys can see that it might, that I can see that it has touched you. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Great. Carol, I'm rushing along a little bit because our hour's coming. We can go over a little, but I don't want to keep people too late.
It's short.
I still need to present the book for next month, and you're welcome to hang along to Michele and see what we're into. So go ahead, Carol. I'm sorry.
Well, Michele, I'm really glad that you believed as that young reporter many years ago. I thought this was a beautiful love story. I'm telling you, tears came into my eyes. I can't tell you how many times in the book it was. And really, I didn't think it was fiction. I mean, it was just seemed so real to me. And when I was about 2/3 through the book, I was like, no, this is real. And so I went back looking, you know, to see for sure that it was fiction, but it was so believable. And there were so many neat twists and turns to it. And I've never read a story like that before. So to me, it was very unique. And I think you were one of the best chocolates that came out of the box. Oh, my question for you is, when are you going to start a new one?
Thank you. I hope soon. Honestly, because I haven't had this kind of encouragement, I almost thought that it was a wasted effort.
Oh.
I have 30 lovely comments on Amazon, and I figured, well, those 30 people must have needed to read it. Maybe I'm supposed to go on and do something else. And for all I knew, it was a documentary about rescuing donkeys. Because I haven't had this type of a reception. I haven't sat with a room full of people who said, I got it, I understood it, and I enjoyed it. And that's,
you know, I have to listen to my team, because when they say, yeah, go ahead and do the fiction book, because I was really nervous about doing a fiction book on here, that they know what they're talking about.
Oh, I thought you meant you were writing one. You took to your guidance and they said,
Oh,
do the
well,
book?
every book I do, I ask my team, is this a good book to present? Is that a good book to present? And they guide me in that
Oh, that's
direction.
beautiful. And that is actually something I'm trying to do, by the way, is in this part of my life is really listen. This, there's some benefit to being our, kind of this part of the life where you have maybe a little more free time. And I love that your guide said that go for the fiction.
Go
Thank
for the
them
fiction
for me,
book,
please.
because I really have strayed away from that. And but 3 pages in, I was hooked. So
That's amazing to me. And Carol, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just, in terms of writing another one, I've never had this type of a reception because I've never been able to get it in the hands of people who believe as I do, or who are fascinated and inspired by the same things that I think all of us are inspired by. And now having talked to all of you and having heard that it touched you and it made you cry, my God, when you're writing a story and someone says they've reacted that emotionally to it, it means I can't even tell you what it means to me in terms of maybe writing another one now, because I think, okay, so maybe I did accomplish what I set out to do, was to touch people's hearts, to give them a sense of my deep belief that we don't die.
Yeah. And most of us, Michele, are not believers. We're knowers. We know it's real.
Right.
Well, you're a very unique group of people. I think that's goes without saying. So, but again, I can't. It's lovely that you guys you seem to. Doesn't anybody have anything bad to say?
Nancy, do you have anything to say at all?
All right, here's the bad.
Okay.
I have not read your book yet. I'm excited to read it. I feel very excited and really joyful that people I'll say I'm a budding medium. I've been training and stuff. So I can use your book to introduce my belief system, like to my sons who are 28 and 29 years old. And so I'm going to go that way. I'm going to read it first, but I'm going to go that way. And it's like Dal, I can say through experience, I've been able to experience that hug from spirit, and also to help others. I've gotten the hug for others, but they also get it. So it's really cool and exciting, and I'm looking forward to you getting yours. Let's see. Donkeys are phenomenal.
I didn't know that until I met some.
They think about their life in service, and they're just honored to be that for us, and that's really what we need to be, right, as humans. And I also am very glad that you are listening, and your book is definitely a gift to the world, but even a bigger gift is coming, because through inspirational writing is how your next book's coming. And there's not going to be any fiction. It's all going to be brought to you and you putting pen to paper. So I wish you well. I just feel it. I know it. It's like it's beaming true. Yeah, girl, you got it going on.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. Honestly, after you've all told me that you thought it was real, I feel like I kind of cheated you by when you get to the end and you go like, this didn't really happen. I either have to put something in the front of the book that says, this is a fiction story. I love that you think it's real, because again, to me, it feels very real. But Nancy, thank you for telling me that I'm going to be writing inspirational fiction. I think that that may be the next way to go for me. Again, you have no idea how this has supercharged me, this gathering with all of you. So thank you. And I thank you so much.
You're muted, Gary.
Susie McDougall, did you read this book, or did you just join us on the?
I've just joined you, but I do have a couple of comments. And my first comment is, I don't know why everybody's getting so tied up about it being fiction, because fiction is a really good doorway to the non-initiated. And coming from the perspective of been tossing some balls around recently with a very strong Catholic person who's torn between where Spiritism sort of says and what the church has taught her and things like that. So I find that using fiction as a doorway it's a non-threatening place for people who have very strong convictions that are the other way. I also have a suggestion, Michelle. I am tied up with a couple of writers groups, and a lot of the libraries, and I'm in Australia obviously, so I don't know if in America the same thing happens, but a lot of the writers groups and libraries have gotten together, and the seniors will have a session at some stage through the week down there where writers will introduce their books to them and obviously sell them as well. But that might be an avenue where you can get it out differently to, like, if it wasn't fiction, it probably wouldn't go. But because it is fiction, that's sort of an area to take it out to can be quite a good way to go with it.
That's
So
wonderful advice.
An idea to think about.
I actually, before you came on, I did mention that because I'm a journalist, I'm used to writing true stories, and because this fiction story is based on true accounts, I'm delighted to hear that it comes across as real. But I do love I believe that that's kind of why I went to fiction, because I couldn't understand why people all this information is available and people, they turn away from the topic of death and dying when it's such if they knew more about it, it could change their lives, that they really knew, not just religious, go to church on Sunday and go like, it's going to be an afterlife and we'll think about that later. But if they really knew the stories that are told, and that's why I did say that it was kind of my way to maybe sneak in these ideas so they're not so frightening. And I now that I recently retired from my work as a journalist full time, I can maybe take the time and go to the libraries and find some other audiences. But I may not have had I not met with you all tonight, because I was really thinking, this book is not really touching people the way I had hoped it would, and yet each of you seems to have seen something in it that I was hoping that people would find.
Michelle, no accidents. You were supposed to be here tonight.
It's stunning to me. So yes, I have to agree with you.
So we have two more people. If you can keep your comments, questions short, so I have time to introduce the book and we don't keep people too late. Steve, did you read the book, or do you have any?
No, I've been real busy this month, but as I was saying the other day, I've read probably, hundreds of books on metaphysics and mediumship, and my sister's a medium, and I'm steeped in this stuff, so I mostly read nonfiction. But the other day I said I'm kind of bored with nonfiction, so I just got your book, and I'm really looking forward to immersing myself in it. And I'm going to start a death cafe this month, locally here in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and I may introduce the book to some of the participants there. These are people that are all going to be discussing death and their thoughts and their fears and whatever their thoughts are. So we can't push.
No. That's again, I wanted people to see the joy in death and dying, and I love the idea of a death cafe. We have one in Niagara Falls, New York, and they have cupcakes and they have laughter and honestly, like Gary said, it's not even, what did you say, Gary? It's not dying. It's just continuing to live.
Yeah, no afterlife, just life.
Just life. Okay.
The way I look at it now, I call it the greater reality. I'm not going to call it the afterlife anymore.
Yeah, and Michelle, those cupcakes will kill you.
The cupcake. Yeah, but you'd be smiling, yeah.
Yeah. So Susie Bennett, you hadn't had a chance to make a comment.
Okay, Susie will make this quick. I stay away from novels, and I have been for probably 20 years. It's all got to be factual. I've got to have the evidence. But I really found this profound. Your writing is phenomenal. I love the fact that I hate to use the word, you threw in the soul pods, the soul groups, with Albert and Sebastian and Rebecca. I thought that was very interesting, and I was thrilled at the end because I thought, oh God, please don't let it be over. And then it was Rebecca's epilogue, and that was a tearjerker. 97 years old, and I mean, the whole book, honestly, it felt extremely factual. All the different aspects of Sebastian, how I could kind of see it coming, how Sebastian was going to have to leave and Albert was going to step in, and it had a very happy, glorious ending, I thought. And interestingly, last week on a webinar, I didn't know whether Lilydale is a real place. And there was a woman that was actually from Lilydale. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh, oh. So kudos. And I'm going to go to Amazon and I'm going to, however you say, rate your book, give you the stars or however it
Thank you.
To get more people to I don't know, maybe that'll help.
Thank you, Susie. I appreciate that. This helps. So your comments help. That motivates me to get out there and push this story more rather than to kind of leave it to languish.
Overly thrilled. So you just keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it. Did everyone talk? I think everybody's had a chance to talk.
Yeah.
I just want to invite you. My email is at the end of the book, and I would love to hear from any of you who have your own stories to share. And I offer to be the beta reader for any of the books that you're working on. So it would be my pleasure. And again, I cannot tell you how much this has helped me to feel the energy to move forward, to continue to try to get this book out here, maybe make that little movie at Lilydale on my cell phone, because I think that will be fun and doable. And I do see it as a movie in my head. So, and thank you for your comments, every single one of them.
Gary, Peter has asked a question in chat. Is there a way of contacting you, Michele? Do you have a website or an email?
Yes, I actually, I do have a website, although I had trouble. Something happened in WordPress where my website address got changed. I do have, my email is mcdeluca@aol.com. So it's M as in Mary, or Michele, mcdeluca@aol.com. And I can't remember my new.
Check the chat. That's right.
Pardon me?
Can you
check in the chat and see if that's correct?
Right, that I've written it down correctly?
And I just...
Oh, there it is. Yes, MC DeLuca. Thank you. I should have had my chat open. Yes, I did. I lost my website, so I would say it to you, but I can't.
Yeah, I lost
I
mine.
also have a Facebook page called Body, Mind, Spirit TV, where when I was during COVID, I had some free time, and I started a natural health channel so I could share these stories.
So
And,
body, mind, spirit.
It's bodies mind spirit TV. Body mind.
Body.
Let me see. It's body. You'd think I would know. I'm a little embarrassed.
Yeah.
I just want to add one more thing, that when you're saying how you have you're thinking about doing the filming in Lilydale, that's spirit. That spirit telling you.
Well,
I think we'll all agree on that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention to everyone, there's a great film on Amazon Prime. It's you can rent it for like $3, called "No One Dies in Lilydale," and it gives you a kind of a tour of the whole town, some mediums, their readings. It's worth the view. So, but
It
Michelle's
is,
going to
and
make a better one.
if any of you ever get that close to my house, I will buy you lunch if you contact me. So,
well, I've got like 3 writer friends in your area. So retirement is looming closer and closer. In fact, I applied for Social Security today.
Oh my!
So when I get to New York, we'll have lunch.
I'll buy you lunch, please.
Okay,
there is nothing I love more than meeting people of like minds and sharing my part of the world with them. Niagara Falls, where my newspaper is. I worked at the Niagara Gazette in Niagara Falls for the last 15 years. And that's a crazy little town that needs lots of spiritual assistance. And,
oh, yeah. I spent a summer in Buffalo. So there was a great line from a play.
I know. I
Do you know the line?
Chorus line.
Yes,
it's redundant.
Line.
Something about being in Buffalo.
I spent a year in Buffalo. I considered suicide, but I realized that would be redundant.
Look, and you know the whole line. Yeah. It's not that bad. I kind of
no,
like
it's
it.
not. It was a unique experience, and I loved going over the bridge to
Niagara
Canada.
Falls is worth the trip, and then Lilydale being right down the road. For those of us who love to explore the idea that there is something more coming, something more wonderful than we can even imagine, that's a fun place to go.
Yeah, it is. So
I can see you and Jane meeting up.
Jane,
you're muted.
Oh, Jane, down there.
Yeah, I went with 2 girlfriends. We flew to Toronto, we rented a car, and we came down to Lilydale, and we stayed just outside of Lilydale. But yes, I want to go back.
Oh, Jane, please call me. Seriously, any of you, I will be your tour guide. I won't make a pest of myself, but I'll make sure that you have an extra good time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Michele, you've been so sweet. Thank you so much for being our guest author this month. It's been delightful.
It's my absolute.
There was something in it for everyone. And when Spirit tells me to present a book, I'm doing it. Because if they ever give me one that everybody hates, that hasn't happened yet in over a year now. But if they ever give me one, I can blame it on Spirit. So
I like that. But they won't. Oh,
So here's the book. Here's the book for the next 2 months, because it is a 510-page book. And it was really prompted by Grace asking, what's it like on the other side? What are the different planes of existence like? So this book, I'm on my second read of. I personally cannot put it down, even on a second read. And it takes you, and it draws from many, many different sources. And it's by Ian Lawton, Lawton. There it is, Afterlife, A Modern Guide to the Unseen Realms. Now, I do want to ask everyone to read the first 260 pages. It's a 500 for this month. And then we get the icing on the cake are the upper planes. Now, the first 260 pages, it's going to take you through all the lower realms. None of you are going to be there because these are people that are really depraved, and we know some of them on the planet because it's a world of many, many different types of people. So, but it's nice to have a roadmap and to know what's there. Excuse me. So if you find it initially when he starts getting into the realms a little heavy, just stick with it, because I took you far enough if you go 260 pages that you're into the upper astral realms where most people end up, which is pretty nice, you know, from the descriptions. So, and then you get into the higher realms and the words start falling away because there are no words. But he does his best to give descriptions of that. So we'll read half the book this month and half the book next month, because I don't expect any of you. I pretty much dropped my life to read a 510-page book in 4 days. But yeah, well, I didn't do anything else, Jane. I just read the book. There was snow. I couldn't do much, so I read the book. But I think you're going to enjoy it. I think it is one of the most comprehensive descriptions of the planes of existence. And he doesn't describe them all because there are thousands. There are subplanes to each plane of existence. So, but it gives a great overview, and I think you'll all find it quite interesting. So 260 pages. Well, I don't have the author here next month. He's in England. So, but we'll have a great discussion. And Michele, you're welcome to join us every month.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fascinating book, and I haven't stumbled across that one yet. So it's an extra bonus prize for me to hear about it.
Well, you've been our bonus prize tonight, and I really want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. This has been life-changing for me. I cannot tell you.
Excellent.
Thank you for your guides too, Steve, for making it happen.
You mean Gary?
No, Gary. That is, I did mean Gary. Is there even a Steve with us? Yes, yeah, Steve. There's Steve. Anyway, Gary and Steve, thank you both.
All right. Well, and you guys, love you all as always. And this makes my month every month, having all of you here together. So sending you lots of love, healing, light, and have a wonderful month, okay?
You and Michele, I hope that when
you
get
safe,
thank you, Gary.
Happy to
be healthy. Thank you, guys. See you next month.
Thank you. See you all.
Bye. See you.
Thank
you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Now, Michele, if I include all the whole tape, it's going to be really long.
You know what? I'd like to send Michele the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're doing with the rest of it. Maybe Wendy might like to view it just to get a feel for how the book club's going. Oh, and if you talk to Wendy, Karen, tell her disregard my email. I found it.
She already rang me in a panic.
Okay. I found another workaround. Every month they keep changing things, and I have to figure out a workaround their codes. So we're all good. And at least I figured it out. And so, well, thanks, Karen, for recording it. I'd like to get a copy. You just send it to me, and I'll.
Well, Wendy won't. We don't. We try to get everything compressed into half an hour because most people won't go longer than 20 minutes. Even interested, you know, our statistics are not very good. People will not watch an hour presentation.
So, were you planning to put it on YouTube then?
No. I'm just telling you what the statistics are from people who actually come on to Wendy's YouTube. And there's 3 breaks. One's at 10 minutes, one's at 20 minutes, and one's at half an hour. Anything longer than that, people just do not tune into. So we try. You are talking about putting it on YouTube then? No, I have not this at all. I mean, I haven't even been given permission by Michele to do anything with that yet.
Oh my goodness!
Tape it, and
you are so welcome. I would actually.
that's all I'm doing. I'm just sort of saying that that's the statistics that we've found on our previous tapes that we've done. That people just don't want to listen for an hour. So everyone who does their podcasts of an hour, they've lost their listeners long before that. So I'm just saying that I've taped the whole lot. In fact,